Hi, I'm Doyle.
And I'm Jordan, and I've got some things to say tonight regarding basically just social media, but really that's not the focus of the topic. The focus that I really want to dig into, and Doyle, maybe you'll appease me here and humor me a bit, um, is that I want to talk more specifically about human behavior on social media and how it's influenced human behavior outside of social media as well, because I think that that's part of the conversation that is, I know some people talk about it, but I don't think it's talked about enough, and I don't think it's talked about directly enough. It's very oblique whenever it gets mentioned, because basically you'll have people talking about current events, and then they'll talk about social media just tangentially to that, and not that, well, human behavior is how it is because of certain things in social media, or is it? Or even just asking the question and describing thoughts around that. I think that that's a big missing piece of the conversation right now around, just society currently. And I don't even mean in extreme things like, the relatively recent riots and things along that. Of course, that's part of it too, but I mean more broadly, more specifically, and honestly, in a more nuanced and subtle manner, because I think that that is a more important thing to look at. It's easy to see the big bangs, right? The real huge changes, the real huge effects that social media can have. It's hard to see the generational, maybe even effects, subtle effects that social media can have, and how it changes our behavior, not just on social media but also off of social media. So that's pretty broad topic. I don't know if we're going to make it all in tonight, because I know we are going to be doing a little bit of an abbreviated podcast, but maybe we could make this part one if it goes too long, and we can pick it up at another time. But what do you think, Doyle? Does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. I think to me the crux of the issue is what you said. It's how it manifests. The effects of social media in personal and interpersonal behavior. The psychology and sociology of it. I think is it's acknowledged, but I don't. To your point, I don't think that it's explicitly discussed enough. Right, because I think people take so much of it as natural and as quote unquote normal, whatever normal is, when I think it's not. Right, I think the governors or the controls on behavior are somewhat much more loosened, if they exist at all. I think in social media, because the feedback is different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I walk up to you face to face and say something or do something, there's an expectation or a risk of an immediate feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, right?
Right.
Whereas with social media, it's not there. So it's kind of like touching the stove. You touch the stove, and if you didn't know it burns you for 5 minutes, there'd be a whole lot of damage, right? But we know instantly
Right.
the stove is hot.
Right.
Whereas with the behavior that I think manifests itself in social media, that feedback is slower, if at all, or if it, and sometimes I think it is opposite of what the typical feedback might be. Right, someone will be stronger, and if you have, typically if you have a strong message of some sort, then you normally would expect a strong message in return, right, of some sort, and sometimes that doesn't happen in social media. Now, many times it does. Sometimes it's overwhelmed, right?
Sure.
I mean, which is a different topic, different path to talk about social media. But yeah, I think to me that's the thing that I would like for us to make sure we dig into some. Now, there are many others surrounding that, but that's one in particular because I have some examples recently that I've witnessed and experienced in social media that I want to talk a little anonymously about, because they were just so unsettling to me personally. And I wasn't directly involved. I was only a spectator in it, but I did witness, multiple of those situations where someone, made a statement on social media, and then there was a reaction and an overreaction, and then there was another reaction, and it was a crowd reaction, in one direction, and kind of peeling back the layers of that. I think will be very interesting to for us to discuss a little bit.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to speak about is, or maybe not speak about directly, but I want to set an understanding from my perspective, and just kind of set my position so that anyone listening or watching would know that I don't think it's arguable. It's not arguable. I don't. I'm gonna be more assertive in my claim than I normally am. Social media is not going away. It's the new thing. No, the new thing. It is. I'm trying to figure out a way to say it that doesn't sound hyperbolic, but it's really
ingrained communication method. It is a currently ingrained communication method.
It is currently, but I think that's too. That's not a strong enough. No, it's not a strong enough way to speak about what it is. Social media is society. This is something I think that particularly. So anybody who's watched us for any period of time understands that I think a lot of our views fall on what a lot of people would term conservative side of things, although I do not adopt that term for myself at all whatsoever. I think that using such binary type terms are destructive to understanding. And social media is one of the big reasons why it's becoming even more destructive to understanding. But even putting that aside, I think that people who do fall, let's just say, somewhere near the orbit of conservatism, which I will say that yes, I'm somewhat near that orbit. I think that crowd, for the most part, is ultra reticent to acknowledge this. I need to set this up better.
Sure.
That crowd generally is really, really, really good about looking at reality, assessing reality, being realistic, and understanding and adapting to reality, right? And not overly committing to changes early because, well, you don't know how that's going to play out, and trying to understand what reality is versus what the theory says reality is, right? And I think those who are farther away from that broad conservative orbit flip that script and say that the theory is what should drive things, and we need to beat reality into the mold of the theory. And so social media is one of those things that I think very, very few of the voices that are near conservatism in that broad sense don't have their eyes open and don't see the reality that society is quickly, and not just quickly, it is careening into the digital realm and out of the physical realm. And that is the crux of the problem. We've almost hit my thesis, but to me, that's basically the crux of the problem that we find in all of the things when people say social media is problematic, causes bad behaviors, these, blah, 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 blah. What the problem is that, okay, maybe all of these things are true. And yes, I think a lot of these things are true. We have to understand how we deal with it. It is a reality. It is the new reality. Maybe that's the way to say it. And there's no going back. Pandora's box is open. That bell is rung, right? It's entropic. It's unidirectional. So we have to figure out how to deal with that. So let's rewind. This is like one of those movies where you see the end first, and then you rewind to see how you get there. But I think that's really my big thing that I want to stay here, especially since we're going to have an abbreviated episode, is that, and I think this is something you and I have never talked about before, and I think that we can have a lot of interesting conversation around this, especially because I'm curious to your perspective at such a strong statement that society has almost no hope of existing in the physical world in the next 20 years. Now, I won't say no hope. Hope's not the right word. It's not hope. Human interaction is fundamentally, and we've had a paradigm shift in human interaction that you can't unshift. This is the thing. It's been flipped. The way things are now are flipped. And the things that we used to know about going and hanging out with friends, that's still going to happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. But that's going to be, you know how it used to be, oh, it's cool, I've got this friend online. That's going to be the norm, and the weird things, I get this friend in real life. that it's going to
Right.
flip like that. I really believe it's going to flip like that. Anyway, that's my
Well, I
thesis.
think it already has begun flipping.
To a great degree, I
think.
think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you said something that really rang very, very loudly in my ears. And I think acknowledging that there is definitely a generational difference between, you and me as far as our perspectives and the point in life that we are. And just stating the obvious, your life up to this point has been steeped more deeply in technology from an early age than I did.
Even in my peer groups, I'm much more so in that than all of my peer group, and even a few years younger than me. Like my sister-in-law, for example, I'm constantly amazed at how little she understands how to use things like YouTube and other things. Not that she doesn't know how to, but just some of the things that I take so for granted about certain social media platforms, she just has no context on. And almost I applaud her for that, because she's living more of her life in IRL meat space,
IRL, yes, I was about to say.
And so, I don't mean that in a derisive way, in any sort of way.
No. But see, but she's younger than you, and so she has made some choices, right? Whereas, like with me, and I would imagine her parents, we're of the generation to where we probably didn't get within an arm's reach of any real computing technology or personal technology, until we were well into our adult years.
You had a calculator.
I remember. Yeah, but that wasn't a personal computing device. That was just that was
you said personal technology. I was just tongue in cheek.
Right. We all the TI-99 was a massive $150 calculator that all the cool kids got. Guess who didn't have one? But the point being is I was a sophomore in college the first time I ever touched a computer. And it was a mainframe. I was doing work study, right? I had a job on campus as part of my financial compensation package for school, in addition to a few small scholarships. And so I was pleased. I was tickled because I got to actually register students. We went from punch card registration my first 2 years to computer registration, and I was actually able to help other students register, which I thought was really, really cool. And then from there, it went back into the pen and paper and the typewriter. Typewriters were still hot. You either had to go to borrow someone's typewriter or hire someone to type up your papers. You didn't type them in a word processor and then print them out on the printer.
I was about to say, I'm of the generation that I actually vividly remember word processors as a single standalone kind of device, not a computer that had a piece of software that was a word processor, but a word processor.
Right. And so the point I'm driving at is it's my generation and the generation. Even the generation before me is probably so out of touch as a generation with technology and how what you described, that social media is now part of society. It's part of who and what everyone is. I'm wrestling with that, right? Not just the technology, because I'm a technology professional. So I, went from never touching a computer to going into that as a profession, within a matter of a few years. But even then, there's the personal technology that I was on, in corporate and business, technology for a long, long time. And so that put me in one class, and different than what like you and the following on generation, came in. Many kids today, they're not even a year old and they've got a tablet in front of them, right? They know how to operate a tablet, right? And a computer and video games. And I don't mean, the handheld, those two, Xbox and all the other branded games, but the little small games, and they know how to use them before they can write their name. And probably it probably has helped hurt them from being able to write it all, quite frankly, hand by hand.
Well, there's an interesting splinter conversation there. Is like, what's the utility and why does it even matter? But that's neither here nor there.
But see that is the part of the new reality that you're alluding to, right?
Exactly.
I naturally think about that now. My wife and I have two checking accounts, right? We're transitioning from one to another. And so we have two accounts, and we probably write a dozen or 24 checks a year. Right. We pay so much with credit cards. And
I don't know if I've written a dozen checks in my life.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
I mean, so there's that difference of perspective, and I see it. And the point you made a while ago that I mentioned was ringing loudly in my ears, was how my initial reaction was, no, that's not the new reality. But the reality is, it is the new reality. And, one of the things that my generation in the workforce, more people in my age, management and leadership tends to be a little bit older, just over time. That's not 100% of the time, but I mean, in many cases, just because you tend to grow into leadership and management positions. And one of the things that has created, certainly management frustrations for me is not understanding clearly enough how the younger generations they're motivated very, very differently than my generation, and even the sub generations, if you will, between me and some of the current generations. I'm tail end of the baby boomers, and so there's multiple generations, right? There's the Gen Xers, the Gen Ys, the millennials, and Gen Zs, and the millennials.
Millennial consumed Gen Y. That's the same generation.
Okay,
they renamed it basically.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. It's not as clear. Like baby boomers was a 1946 to 1962 kind of range. That's a long, and I don't think the other generations are, because of the rapidity of which technology is changing and it's changing reality. Right. And I think the kind of the highway that new reality has come from, or is going down, whatever, if it's a cause and effect, I'm not really trying to say that right at the moment, is social media. Mm-hmm. For a long time, I personally didn't get it. And some days I still don't get it, right? Because it feels the lack of actual touch. Now, there are pseudo touch, right? I mean, when you interact with people and the interaction, when there's connections and things like that, they're at a level, but it's not. There's no, you don't shake hands, which right now no one's shaking hands. But I mean, that physical tactile touch. Yeah. That I know it's kind of redundant there, but that's missing, and that's pardon.
I said for emphasis.
Oh, for instance, right? Yeah, and so I think that's part that the ones in my age and near my age, my generation, I think that's a struggle with the new reality. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's a judgment or a qualitative judgment. It's just an adjustment, right? And that's the tough part, right? Because then you get some some of the current politicians and other various leaders that are my age or older, and they have learned but they leverage social media. I don't think they use it as a reality. I think they leverage it. A lot of times they do that for a purpose, a motive and a purpose. And I think there's I think a dichotomy, maybe not a dichotomy, but there are certainly two camps, at least two. There are those that have a purity of use on social media, if that's a way to put it, and then those that are looking to manipulate and or leverage. Maybe not to manipulate has more of a negative connotation, but they're using it to leverage something for a motive and their benefit, or to further whatever their goals or objectives are.
Here's the I'm gonna peel back the scales in your eyes one more layer. Everybody, no, and I'm not trying to be mean by saying that. I know that sounded mean.
No, I didn't. I'm not offended by it.
Everybody on social media is trying to leverage everybody else. That's why it exists. It's a market, just like any market. The people who try to use it purely or with purity, the way that you mentioned, mm-hmm. are irrelevant and are never seen or heard. And increasingly so, they're not heard by even their family and friends because of how the algorithms work on these platforms. everybody is leveraging everybody. And that's the reason why it's so weird, is that it creates these, I don't want to use the word perverse, because I don't think it's always that way. I think it creates these strange economies where the credit or the currency of those economies isn't, am I helping people out and being a good person, or am I adding constructively to someone's life? The currency can be a lot of different things that are, and some of them are really insidious things, is what's really bad about it all. And some of it is just pure business, right? It's just literal currency, money, and ads and stuff like that, or just selling clout and selling reach, selling access, that sort of a thing. But like I said, anybody who's using any of these platforms purely from a natural standpoint is likely not being heard at all, and certainly is not relevant to any impact that the platform has. And that sounds cold and like calloused, and I don't mean it to be that way, because I think that it's sad that it's that way. I'm just speaking what I understand is the reality of it. And if I'm wrong, I hope somebody can correct me, but that's really how I see it.
I hope you're wrong, but I certainly cannot refute your comments there and your conclusion, because it is supported by my observations, right? Obviously there's the business side of things, right? That's, that happens because you can go search something, in Google or Yahoo or Bing, and then a few moments later, if you're in Facebook, then you see an ad for something related to what you searched, or even spookier things. My wife and I've had conversations, and the next day that exact thing pops up and I don't have Alexa.
Instagram's the worst for that. 100% Instagram's the worst for that. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I don't know where they're getting it, but I mean, it's one of those spooky things where you go, something heard me. What is it that heard me? And that's the phone. I get that. Yeah, it's got to be, because first of all, who the maker of my particular phone is, it fits right into their structure. And so I've seen that. I've witnessed it, that side. And then on the other side, you can see those that have a singular purpose, of what they're trying to do, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you agree with it, it's not a bad thing. If you don't agree with it, then you think it's a bad thing. And I'm not passing judgment, but I'm just, because there are those on both sides of that coin, that some that I agree with, and they're doing this singular thing, and they talk about nothing but this topic and everything related to it.
I need to call you out just a little bit. You made a statement that I really don't agree with, and I don't think you meant it the way that you said it, but I really think it requires addressing. You said that something along the lines of, and sometimes I agree with it, and sometimes I don't agree with it, and that's bad, or something like that is what you'd said.
No, I'm being tongue in cheek.
Okay,
so not me personally. I'm saying that someone goes, yeah, I think that's good, because they won't say this. They agree with it, so I think it's good. But those things that they don't agree with, they'll say, no, that's not good. That's all I was saying.
That's one of the fundamentally bad things about social media is that binary thing.
Absolutely,
that, for sure.
Absolutely. Which, if you'll bear with me, that brings me to the one example that I want to speak about that I just witnessed in the past several days. Sure. A gentleman that I hold personally in high regard. I've known him for 25 years or more. He was a senior executive at a company I worked for, and now he is the most senior executive at another company, held in high regard. And most people that I know that know him, that have worked with him, been around him, interacted with him, hold him in high regard as well. And not that guarantees him any kind of anything over anyone else, but I'm just saying he's not an extremist, in my observation, either way, one way or the other. But he posted on one of the social media platforms a pretty strong dissertation, if you will. It was several paragraphs. He was expressing a very strong opinion about a very hot topic current hot topic. And, he did not call out anybody in particular. He called out circumstances and situations that he disagreed with and he was concerned about, gave support for it. It was very fact-based. There was emotion. It was more passion rather than, an emotive an emotive kind of stance. I read it, and first of all, I was kind of a little surprised that someone of his stature in the business world would make that kind of statement on social media. I mean, not that it was nothing wrong. It wasn't wrong. It's just you typically that behavior tends to be more restrained from those that have much at risk. And a number of people responded and said that they agreed with him and on all points. And then there was one person that responded, and it was a former colleague's spouse, and someone that she said he had been a friend of his for a long, long time, and she proceeded to just rail on him. Very personal, right? It wasn't refuting the points or facts that he was presenting. It was, I cannot believe that you're that ignorant, that you're this and you're that and you're the other, and that you don't have any kind of compassion.
Right. Just a litany of ad hominem.
Yeah. And then I thought, you and my husband and I were good friends for years, but I must have been wrong. I mean, that is so going from a topic to personal, right? And I get it. There's always the personal, because if it's not a debate or discussion that doesn't, people that if they don't have any kind of emotion or passion about something, there's, it's very, very difficult to have a meaningful, constructive debate, right? Because it's people just don't engage. And that was not an engagement. That was an attack.
Sure.
And so I think what I mentioned earlier about, I think the immediacy or the lack of immediate feedback, right? Someone didn't know the stove was hot for a while, and didn't react as quick, because we would be more restrained if we were face to face in a verbal dialogue.
Sure.
In many cases, in a lot of cases, we see some things going on in the public realm and in politicians and government, that they're not as restrained anymore. They're, everyone is gloves off and Katie bar the door, no holds barred.
Well, I mean, I think politicians are a very poor example to hold up for standard human behavior.
No doubt. Absolutely. I fully agree. And so this was, it was just kind of amazed that if we had been out to a social gathering somewhere, that kind of dialogue likely wouldn't have happened either way, quite frankly. I mean,
right.
The statement, the initial statement might have been made, but it might have been made a little more collegially, right? Not as a rant. I'll go ahead and say rant. I mean, it's maybe not that it was necessarily that rant type. It wasn't railing as much as it was a very philosophical and principled perspective from my, even whether it was right or left doesn't matter. And the reaction of the others that heard it, because what ended up happening, the reason I set the context is this person, this gentleman I've known for a long, long time, and I hold him in high regard. I have a great deal of respect for him. That there were 60 or 70 responses within just a few hours of others that reacted to the respondent that I mentioned that just made the personal attack. They reacted and went back, went on her, and in fact, guns a-blazing, so to speak. Not literally, of course, but verbally. And that to me is a very unsettling example of the types of behaviors and actions that social media is that is happening on social media. I'm not going to blame social media because that was the people, right?
Sure.
Whatever platform it was had nothing to do with that interaction. That interaction,
right.
But the platform insulates people from the humanity of dialogue like that. And that's the hard part. That's the part that is most unsettling to me. Even now, I can't communicate on a social platform without that type of filter. How is it going to be perceived? How is the greater good worth the potential harm kind of thing?
I think you used a term that you didn't. I think it's a term in the way you think about it, and I think you used the right term, but I think you meant a different term. You said that didn't represent the humanity. I think it very well represented the humanity. What it didn't represent was the civility, right?
Yeah.
And so that precisely is my one of the big things I wanted to talk about, even with this topic, was that social media is it's not a club. When I say club, I mean like a blunt instrument, like a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used as a club, but people think that it is not a club, but maybe like a poison or something that alters people, and they become different when they get on social media. Part of my thesis is no, that people are how people are, and it is the anonymity. The ability to talk at anybody, and I say at, not necessarily with, but to talk at anybody.
That's a great way to put it.
All of this stuff, and there's lots of other factors, add it into social media being a truth serum of sorts, where you see the reality of who someone is. You may not know who that person is. You may not be able to find out who that person is, but you see the real of that person. I could go and make an account 7233587B on Twitter right now. I'm sure that's probably available. And then I can go and rail against, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and, Barack Obama and all these people. And it's like, international, like, what's his name? Tony Blair. And, I mean, there's, everybody around the world. I could... Yeah, like Angela Merkel and all these people. I could do whatever. I could go say all these terrible things. I don't know why I keep picking politicians. It's just the names that occur to me for some reason. Maybe
targets.
Or maybe that's just me wanting to rail against them all. Yeah. Maybe that's the Freudian slip. Anyway, but I could do that, and I could do that, but I don't do that. And I would feel bad if I did that. And nobody would ever know it was me. Nobody but myself would ever know it's me. But I could just not bring myself to do that. Because it's not who I am. And I'm not trying to say, ooh, that's not who I am. But what I am saying is, it is some of those people, right? I know that there's darkness in me, right? All of us have some shadow in us. And I understand that exists in me too. So I'm not saying I'm above it in any sense. But... maybe my shadow's worse than some of these people that do these things anonymously out on social media. But the reality of it, that doesn't matter, neither here nor there. The reality of it is, it's not making us be something we're not. What it's doing is destroying civility. That's all that's happening here, is we've had, thousands of years certainly thousands of years of development of civil society that is just in rapid fashion, in the course of 2 decades, basically, is being evaporated. And that's it. That doesn't mean that it's bad necessarily. What it means is,
it doesn't have to be bad.
Correct. But what the deal is we're not accustomed to we don't know what's next. We don't know the structure. Right. We don't know the game. We don't know how we're supposed to relate to people if we destroy civil society in that way. Right. And that is the real problem that I have with these people that you want to talk about, like cancel culture and all this other kinds of crap that's, I know cancel culture's been around for a long time on social media. It's just now coming into the popular consciousness. Because I know, particularly no. It's been really frequent for a long time. Like, 'cause I know lots of individuals that were very popular on like YouTube or Twitch or all these other places that got canceled at smaller scale. You're talking about like 100,000 people or 50,000 people versus like millions of people. Where it literally ended their career. They were like a 50K sub YouTuber, and they had to go away. And even ones that are bigger than that, like a million sub YouTuber. And one example in my mind for real right now, like basically he was married to this woman, and if I say this example, everybody's gonna know who I'm talking about. But he was married to this woman, and they were both really popular in nerd culture. Like he had a 1 million subscriber YouTube channel. She had like her own businesses doing all this stuff, and they had a really messy public separation where she outright lied about him and things that he did and said. And he got blackballed, hardcore, canceled, right? And for like a year, he went into a hole and went away. And then like nobody knew anything until like 6 months later or something like that. All of the facts came out. Like it literally, everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, and there's so many people that were just like completely repentant. That was like, oh, I just like completely like lambasted this dude for 6 months, and it turns out I was wrong." But most people just doubled down. It's like, no, these are lies. These facts aren't true. And so people they use emotion as substitute for fact. That is the ultimate problem with destroying civil society, because civil society is based on the presumption that we can agree that these things exist called facts, and that these facts are understandable, independent of us, and facts don't exist just because I can beat you, and I can beat you into a pulp, and so this is fact because I say it is, and I can beat you into a pulp. The problem is that's what we're reverting to, right? And that's the way it used to be, right?
Right.
It's really problematic. I don't think people. I think some people do, but I think a lot of people don't understand how bad that really is.
So what say ye that we take this as our stopping point for the evening? Because I think you really hit a big nail on the head that I don't want to minimize. I think you've, as you used the term earlier, you've peeled back more scales off my eyes. When you articulated there that that whole stream where it went from, it's not humanity, it's the civility, and I really appreciate that correction, because that does communicate more what was in my heart rather than what was in my head coming out, and mouth coming out of my mouth, because I think it's absolutely true. That's what I was feeling when I said humanity, was the civility, how we treat one another,
right?
And I think, to your point, and it goes back to comments we made earlier too about the use of emotion to try to make a point versus information and facts. And I use the term information and facts because they're not always the same, right? Facts to me are irrefutable. They are facts. They are things that have been proven, whereas information, it could be conclusions drawn from facts, from falsehoods, from opinions, from emotions, things of that sort.
By definition, information has to go through a filter, and it's how much do you trust the filter that it's gone through.
Right. So I think your point is so profound that I think if I were to try to add anything else now, it would kind of lessen it somewhat. And so I think that's a good launching point for our next podcast, because I really want to pursue that farther. The whole thing about the civility or the lack of it in social media, and why. I mean, and you mentioned one of the primary reasons. It's because people, their true selves are coming out, or their dark true selves are coming out, and
or have the potential to. Have the potential to, right? And so let's leave this on a light note. That's not all of social media. There is so much good out there. There's so much good that has been facilitated, would never have been able to exist or occur pre-social media. So I don't. It's like most things. It's a tool. It's a tool, and how it gets used is what's important. And I'm not sitting here like, we need to have reasonable laws and restrictions around these tools. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we as humans need to sit down and look at what it's doing to how our society works and how we interact, and then adjust. But the thing is, we're not going to get that luxury. That's the problem. We're just not going to get that luxury. Anyway, but there's so much good on social media, and I've been involved with so many amazing. I've met so many amazing people through social media. I can't even really say. And technically, I guess you could say I met my wife through social media, although it was before MySpace, before all those things, even on a blog ring back in the day. So we definitely. My life has been affected by social media in extremely significant ways.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and one might conclude that based on how we've been speaking tonight, that there is no good. That we would be saying that, and certainly I want to echo what you said. That there is a lot of good. It is a tool, and what we're really reflecting on to a great extent is the negative, more negative uses, potential of the outcomes and the results of social media. So, anyway, good discussion. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot, and I always do. As I tell you many times, talking with you, I learn a lot from you. I think you've been a big help to me to understand and embrace more about the more current technologies and social media and things of that sort, and the positives and the good methods, and also the realities too, right? Because you got to understand both sides of the coin to be able to cash the money, so to speak.
Yeah, right.
And figuratively and literally. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And as always, it's a great discussion and conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Doyle. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
And next time.
Good
night.